really don't know how this one's going to go. I have a script. It's good to have a script when you're probably going to get a letter from Steve. Anyway, in the aftermath of the 2020 election, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer became a darling of election deniers all over the country. He dramatically claimed that his team could hack into voting systems.
Not only do we now have access through the devices to the poll pad, the system, but we are in.
And he could use his proprietary technology and his skills as a pattern recognition expert.
I am an inventor and pattern recognition expert
with decades of experience to examine the paper ballots and prove conclusively whether or not there had been widespread election fraud in the 2020 election. It's really hard to say this with a straight face. I'm sorry. Once you see this guy, you'll understand. You'll get it. And despite doing none of those things in the aftermath of the 2020 election, he has continued to talk and talk and talk. And that has become his current thing, as far as I can tell, along with a mix of other kind of right-wing, weird political stuff. Now he's an election expert. And if you go back and look at his past, he has gone through many phases of inventing and reinventing himself and finding yet another crowd of people who will believe in him. The election stuff he's been talking about for 4 years now. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't already have a plan to insert himself in the chaos of the 2024 election, which we know is coming. And he has been working for years to position himself as an election authority. I'm sorry. It's, yeah, I will say it nicely. Position himself as an elections. It's funny because, I won't go there yet. So anyway, I think it's worth taking a look at our friend Jovan and his role in the mess that transpired after the 2020 election. So I originally conceived of this as a single video, as kind of a prelude to getting back in and talking about the Swordgate stuff, but I realized as I was collecting material for this video that it is way, way too much to go into in a single video. So this is going to be a series. Part 1 is, who the is this guy? That's a great question. Who the is Jovan Hutton Pulitzer? Now he introduces himself as the guy who's responsible for a QR code.
The fact that your phone now can scan a barcode in any grocery store or any kind of code, any type of machine-readable code as it talks to the internet, that's my technology.
He introduces himself as a pattern recognition expert, including in this sworn affidavit. And he never forgets to throw in his claim that he is a Smithsonian Laureate Award winner. And what is the Smithsonian Laureate Award? Well, that's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. And I would start with this blog post by Jason Colavito. Good luck with that one, but it's part of the basket of Jovan Hutton Pulitzer claims about his own greatness.
You wanted to have an intellectually honest discussion with me, but you don't want to actually talk about policy. That's what I thought, man. This is why I call.
All right, but the way he presents himself now is not the whole story, so I'm going to tell you some other parts of the story that you might find interesting. So I first became familiar with Jovan Hutton Pulitzer when he was still going by the, it's not a nickname, what would it be? Made-up title of Treasure Force Commander. But that's not the beginning of the amazing tales of Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. It goes way farther back than that. It's a long story, but we're going to do a short version. We'll start our short version of the story when he was still going by his given name, which is Jeffrey Jovan Philyaw. Philyaw was one of the guys behind the QCat, a now legendary device so bad that it made Time magazine's list of 50 worst inventions of all time. If you just Google QCat, you'll get into it really, really quickly. The QCat came out in the year 2000. It didn't make it more than a couple years before it was already technology history. And after that died, Jeffrey Jovan Philyaw changed his name to Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, and he started selling crystals. That's right, crystals. And these were no ordinary crystals because, of course, with Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, nothing is ever simply ordinary. These crystals had spiritual significance. The Pulitzer collection disappeared from the web somewhere between 2006 and 2007. You can still find it on the Internet Wayback Archive. Nothing is ever really gone, Jovan. Sorry. By 2012, Pulitzer was well into his Treasure Force Commander phase, decked out in exploration gear and a uniform with fake medals.
Commander Pulitzer, who has written over 200 books on American history, legends, and treasure tales, and his team are part of explorationhistory.org, These modern-day Indiana Jones who have risen to international fame in recent years as news of their remarkable skills at cracking and solving famous treasure legends.
And it was after that that Pulitzer managed to get himself onto season 2 of The Curse of Oak Island, where he famously claimed that the island was the hiding place for the Ark of the Covenant.
In the bottom of this hole is going to be some of the most important pieces of treasure to mankind. We're talking about the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant? The gold chest, which according to the Old Testament contained the actual 10 Commandments?
Pulitzer's brief involvement on Oak Island led him to identify a modern brass tourist sword as a 100% confirmed Roman artifact. And of course, this artifact would, quote-unquote, rewrite history. This was yet another smoking gun. This was one of many attempts of his to find some traction in kind of the, lost, forbidden history world. And this one, he got some traction. This story went viral. It was all over the place, and ultimately it was his undoing.
As you know, the show had the sword tested by the local world-renowned St. Mary's University, and the sword was deemed a modern replica. This enraged Pulitzer, who cried conspiracy and began slamming the History Channel, the show, the university, the Nova Scotian government, even the local Nova Scotian newspapers, saying they were all hiding the truth, even though he himself would not, and still has not over 2 years later, release his findings that he believed to show the sword as ancient. This progressed further as producer Kevin Burns said in an interview with Frank magazine that he encouraged the brothers to buy the sword to discredit Pulitzer, and even went as far as to remove Pulitzer's name from the credits in the IMDb, as well as Pulitzer being told he is no longer welcome on Oak Island, and his opinions on how the findings he does not understand are wrong, and some pictures.
All right, I stop. We get into that later. I'm going to love discussing that again and going through all of that story, because it's a long story, much too long to encapsulate here. But anyway, for him, the battle over that fake Roman sword was extremely embarrassing, and it basically, I won't say it caused, but it coincided with his hasty retreat from the lost history world and trying to present himself as some kind of historical expert, with these many, many web pages and podcasts and interviews and attempts to get on programs and his sizzle reels and all this kind of stuff. And he made an attempt to get most, if not all of that, off of the internet so that he could reinvent himself yet again into something else. And in fact, his attempts to scrub that part of his life off of the internet led to him contacting the University of South Carolina, where I worked at the time, to try to pressure me in order to get me to take things down. And you know how many things I took down? Take a wild guess. Yeah, that's right. None. You know what? Because everything I wrote was true. And I always said, Hutton, if you can point out to me something that I wrote that is false, I will gladly take it down. It's easy to be confident when you're telling the truth. I have not scrubbed my past off of the internet. The Swordgate stuff is a pretty funny, complicated in some ways story, and you're going to love it when I tell it. I guarantee you, but I am not going to tell it today because it's too much. It's too sexy.
Story is going to go in a very bizarre direction.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
I love it when that happens.
So I'll start vaguely at the beginning, because you have to understand the pathology of this very strange man. His name. He actually told me he hated his name, and that's why he changed it.
He told you?
Yes.
You spoke to him?
I have spoken to this man before his websites were shut down. He used to have manufactured phone calls between myself and him.
Manufactured?
So we would have phone calls about other subjects, and then he would splice and edit them so that it sounded like he was arguing something else and I was ignoring him.
I don't think you're allowed to do that.
Technically, you're not, but also we used it for content. We had fun with it, being like, look at this lunatic.
That's why, for the record, I have never spoken with him. I get everything in writing because he can't fake edit an email after he sends it to me because I have my own copy. So, Jovan, we can settle this with a quick phone call. Nope, not gonna happen.
Anyway, it makes me laugh again, just reliving it all, the glory days. Moving on. So after skulking away from his epic humiliation at the hands of my friends and I, Pulitzer eventually reinvented himself as a elections expert, or someone with technology and knowledge that could benefit the examination of elections in a novel way, let's say, in the aftermath of the 2020 election. And I first became aware of his efforts to do this when he showed up at a, I think it was a Senate hearing in Georgia. And I'm like, hey, I know that dude. What's that movie? Fast Times at Ridgemont High? Spicoli?
Yeah, I know that dude.
Mr. Spicoli.
That's where we will start, where we will pick up with part 2 of Jovan Hutton. That's where we will pick up with part 2 of Jovan Hutton Pulitzer and the 2020 election. So stay tuned.